Sarah Martinez walked through the automatic doors of St. Mary's Hospital at exactly 10:45 p.m. She was always 15 minutes early for her shift. It was a habit she had learned from her mother, who used to say that being on time was being late. Sarah's white nursing shoes made soft sounds on the clean floor as she headed to the elevator. The hospital at night was different from the day. It was quieter, but not silent. There were still beeps from machines, soft voices from nurses talking to patients, and the distant sound of ambulances bringing new people who needed help. Sarah liked the night shift. During the day, there were too many people, too much noise, and too much rush. At night, she could spend more time with her patients. She could listen to their stories and hold their hands when they were scared. Sarah had been working as a nurse for 12 years. She was 34 years old and had never married. She lived alone in a small apartment on the third floor of an old building. The apartment had one bedroom, a tiny kitchen, and a living room that was just big enough for a couch and a television. The rent was cheap, which was good because nurses did not make a lot of money. Every morning after work, Sarah would drive to her daughter Emma's school to pick her up. Emma was 8 years old and lived with Sarah's sister Maria during the week. Maria had 3 children of her own, but she never complained about taking care of Emma too. Sarah worked nights so she could spend the afternoons with Emma, help her with homework, and take her to the park. Sarah's life was simple and predictable. She worked, she slept, she spent time with Emma, and then she worked again. She did not go out with friends very often. She did not date. She did not have hobbies. She had forgotten what it felt like to dream about something bigger than just getting through each day, but there was something in Sarah's apartment that told a different story about who she used to be. In the corner of her bedroom, behind a pile of old blankets and winter coats, there was a black violin case. The case was covered in dust and had not been opened in 15 years. Sometimes when Sarah was cleaning her room, she would see the case and remember the girl she used to be. When Sarah was in high school, music was everything to her. She played violin in the school orchestra and took private lessons with Mrs. Chun, an old Chinese woman who lived 2 blocks from Sarah's house. Mrs. Chun was strict but kind. She would make Sarah play the same piece over and over until it was perfect. Music is not about playing the right notes, Mrs. Chun would say. Music is about feeling the right emotions. Sarah was good at violin, very good. Her high school music teacher, Mr. Rodriguez, told her she could get a scholarship to study music in college. He said she had a gift. But when Sarah graduated from high school, her father got sick. He had cancer and could not work anymore. Sarah's family needed money for his medical bills. Instead of going to college to study music, Sarah went to nursing school. It was practical. Nurses always had jobs. Nurses could help their families pay bills. Sarah never regretted becoming a nurse. She loved helping people. She loved being there for families during the worst times of their lives. But sometimes late at night when she was checking on sleeping patients, she would remember the feeling of playing violin. She would remember how the music would flow through her fingers and make her feel like she was flying. One Tuesday afternoon, Sarah was sitting at Maria's kitchen table, helping Emma with her math homework when Emma said something that changed everything. "Mom, there's going to be a talent show at the community center," Emma said, not looking up from her worksheet. "My friend Jessica is going to sing a song from that movie about the princess." Sarah nodded and helped Emma with a problem about adding fractions. She was not really listening. Emma was always talking about her friends and what they were doing. "I want to be in the talent show too," Emma continued. "But I don't know what to do. I can't sing like Jessica. And I can't dance like Madison." "You're good at lots of things." "Sweetheart," Sarah said automatically. "You could draw a picture or tell a joke." Emma shook her head. "That's not talent show stuff, Mom. I need something special. Something that will make people clap." Sarah looked at her daughter's face. Emma had the same dark eyes and thick black hair that Sarah had. But unlike Sarah, Emma was not afraid to dream big. She was not afraid to want things. "What about piano?" Sarah suggested. "Aunt Maria has that old keyboard in the basement." I don't know how to play piano, Emma said. Nobody ever taught me. Sarah felt something twist in her stomach. She had never taught Emma about music. She had never even told Emma that she used to play violin. It was like that part of her life had been locked away in the dusty case in her bedroom. What about violin? Sarah heard herself say. The words came out before she could stop them. Emma looked up from her homework with surprise. Violin? That's, boring. Only old people play violin. Sarah laughed despite herself. Violin is not boring. It's beautiful. It can sound like singing or like crying or like birds flying through the sky. Do you know how to play violin, Mom? Emma asked. Sarah hesitated. She had not talked about music in so long that it felt strange to say the words out loud. I used to play a long time ago. Emma's eyes got wide. Really? You never told me that. Can you still play? I don't know, Sarah said honestly. It's been a very long time. Will you teach me? Emma asked. Will you play violin with me in the talent show? Sarah's heart started beating faster. The thought of opening that violin case, of holding the instrument again, scared her more than she wanted to admit. What if she had forgotten everything? What if her fingers did not remember how to move? What if the violin was broken after all these years? But Emma was looking at her with such hope in her eyes. Sarah had never seen her daughter want something so much. It would just be a simple song, Sarah said slowly. Nothing fancy, something easy that we could learn together. Yes, Emma said, jumping up from her chair. Something simple. When can we start? Sarah looked at her daughter's excited face and felt something wake up inside her chest. It was a feeling she had not felt in 15 years. It was the feeling of possibility. We can start this weekend, Sarah said. But first, I need to see if my old violin still works. That night, after Sarah got home from her shift at the hospital, she stood in front of her bedroom closet for a long time. She could see the black case behind the pile of blankets. It was waiting for her, just like it had been waiting for 15 years. Finally, Sarah moved the blankets aside and pulled out the violin case. It was heavier than she remembered. She carried it to her kitchen table and set it down carefully. Her hands were shaking as she opened the metal clasps. Inside the case, the violin looked exactly the same as the day she had put it away. The wood was still shiny and beautiful. The strings were still attached, though they would need to be tuned. Sarah touched the violin very gently, like she was touching something sacred. Maybe it was not too late to remember who she used to be. Maybe it was not too late to show Emma that dreams could come true, even simple ones. Maybe playing a simple song at a community center talent show could be the beginning of something wonderful. Sarah closed the violin case and smiled. For the first time in 15 years, she was excited about tomorrow. Saturday morning came slowly for Sarah. She had worked Friday night at the hospital, and her body was tired, but her mind was wide awake. She kept thinking about the violin case sitting on her kitchen table. Every time she walked past it, her stomach felt nervous and excited at the same time. Emma was coming over at noon. Sarah had promised to show her the violin and start teaching her how to hold it properly. But first, Sarah needed to see if she could still remember how to play. She needed to know if 15 years had taken away everything she once knew about music. Sarah made herself a cup of coffee and sat down at the kitchen table. The violin case looked bigger in the morning light. She opened it again, and the smell hit her immediately. It was the smell of old wood and rosin and memories. For a moment, she was 17 years old again, sitting in Mrs. Chun's living room, playing scales until her fingers hurt. She lifted the violin out of the case very carefully. It felt strange in her hands, like holding something precious that belonged to someone else. The neck of the violin was smooth under her fingers. The wood was still beautiful, with grain lines that looked like tiny rivers running through honey-colored hills. The bow was in worse shape than the violin. Some of the horsehair had broken, and it needed new rosin, but it would work for now. Sarah tightened the bow and picked up the small cake of rosin from the case. As she rubbed the rosin on the bow hair, the familiar sweet smell filled her kitchen. Now came the hard part. Sarah put the violin under her chin, the way Mrs. Chun had taught her so many years ago. The chin rest felt cold against her skin. She positioned her left hand on the neck of the violin and raised the bow to the strings. The first sound she made was terrible. It was scratchy and loud and nothing like music. Sarah winced and tried again. This time it was a little better, but still not good. Her fingers felt clumsy and wrong. The bow felt too heavy in her right hand. "This was a mistake," Sarah said out loud to her empty kitchen. "I can't do this. I've forgotten everything." But something made her try again. Maybe it was the memory of Emma's excited face. Maybe it was the way the violin felt familiar, even though her fingers had forgotten how to use it. Sarah closed her eyes and tried to remember the feeling of playing music instead of just playing notes. She started with a simple scale, the first thing Mrs. Chun had ever taught her. C major, 8 notes up, 8 notes down. At first, her fingers moved slowly and uncertainly. But by the third time through the scale, muscle memory started to return. Her fingers began to remember where to press on the strings. Her right hand began to remember how to move the bow smoothly. After an hour of playing scales, Sarah tried her first real song. She chose Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star because it was simple and because that was what she had promised to teach Emma. The melody was easy enough that Sarah could play it without reading music. But as she played the simple children's song, something unexpected happened. The notes sounded lonely by themselves. So Sarah tried adding a harmony note here and there. She tried playing some notes louder and some notes softer. She tried making the bow move faster during the exciting parts and slower during the gentle parts. Before she knew it, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star had become something bigger and more beautiful than she had planned. Sarah stopped playing and looked at the violin in surprise. Where had that come from? She had only meant to play the simple version, the one that any beginner could learn. But her fingers had started adding things on their own, like they remembered music that her brain had forgotten. The doorbell rang. At exactly noon, Emma bounced into the apartment with her backpack and a big smile. Maria was behind her, carrying a bag of groceries. "I brought lunch," Maria said, giving Sarah a hug. "I figured you'd be too nervous to eat anything this morning." "I'm not nervous," Sarah lied. "Mom, can I see the violin now?" Emma asked, dropping her backpack on the floor. Sarah led Emma to the kitchen table where the violin was waiting. Emma's eyes got wide when she saw it. "It's so pretty," Emma whispered. "Can I touch it?" "Very gently," Sarah said. "Violins are delicate." Emma ran one finger along the curved edge of the violin. "It feels smooth like a seashell. How old is it?" "This violin is about 50 years old," Sarah said. "My grandmother bought it for me when I was your age." "She saved money for 2 years to buy it? Your grandmother bought it?" Emma asked. "The grandmother I never met?" Sarah nodded. Her mother had died when Emma was a baby. Grandma Rosa loved music. She couldn't afford lessons for herself when she was young, but she wanted to make sure I could learn. Maria smiled from where she was putting groceries in the refrigerator. "I remember when Mama bought that violin." Sarah cried for an hour because she was so happy. "Will you play something for me, Mom?" Emma asked. Sarah picked up the violin and put it under her chin. She decided to play the simple version of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star first so Emma could hear how it was supposed to sound, but again, her fingers started adding little decorations to the melody. She played the main tune, but she also played soft harmony notes underneath it. She made some parts sound like questions and other parts sound like answers. When she finished, Emma was staring at her with her mouth open. "Mom, that was amazing. You sound like someone on TV." Sarah laughed. "It's just a simple song, sweetheart." "That didn't sound simple," Maria said. She had stopped putting away groceries and was watching Sarah with a strange expression. "That sounded ... professional." Sarah felt her cheeks get warm. "I'm just fooling around. I haven't played in 15 years. I'm very rusty." "If that's rusty, I'd like to hear you when you're not rusty," Maria said. For the next 2 hours, Sarah taught Emma how to hold the violin properly. It was harder than Emma had expected. The violin kept slipping off her shoulder. Her left arm got tired from holding it up. The bow felt awkward in her small hand. "This is hard," Emma said after trying to play one note for the 10th time. "How long did it take you to learn?" "It took me months to hold the violin correctly," Sarah said. "And about a year before I could play a whole song without making mistakes. But Emma, you don't have to be perfect. We just need to learn enough for the talent show." "How much do I need to learn?" Emma asked. Sarah thought about it. The talent show was in 6 weeks. Emma could probably learn to play the melody of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star in that time if she practiced every day. Sarah could play a harmony part to make it sound fuller. "You just need to learn the main melody," Sarah said. "I'll play the other parts." "What other parts?" Emma asked. Sarah picked up her violin again. This time she played Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star the way it had been growing in her mind all morning. She played the melody once through simply. Then she played it again with harmony. Then she played a variation where the rhythm was different. Then she played it with a low, gentle accompaniment that sounded like a lullaby. Emma listened with her eyes closed. When Sarah finished, Emma opened her eyes slowly. "Mom, that doesn't sound like Twinkle, Little Star anymore. That sounds like ... like a real song, like something special." Sarah looked at the violin in her hands. Emma was right. Somehow, the simple children's song had become something else. Something that made her heart beat faster when she played it. "I guess I got carried away," Sarah said. "Don't stop getting carried away," Maria said quietly. "I haven't seen you this excited about anything in years." That evening, after Emma and Maria had gone home, Sarah sat in her living room with the violin. She had planned to put it away until tomorrow, when Emma would come for her next lesson. But she couldn't stop thinking about the music she had played that afternoon. She started with Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star again, but this time she let herself explore even more. She played the melody backwards. She played it in a minor key. That sounded sad and mysterious. She played it fast like a dance and slow like a prayer. Each time she played the song, it became something different. It was like the simple tune was just the beginning, and there were hundreds of other songs hiding inside it, waiting to be discovered. Sarah played until her fingers were sore and her neck was stiff. When she finally put the violin away, it was almost midnight. She had to work the next evening, which meant she needed to sleep soon. But she felt more awake than she had in years. As she got ready for bed, Sarah thought about Emma's lesson that afternoon. Emma had struggled with holding the violin, but she had not given up. She had kept trying even when it was hard. Even when her arm hurt and the sounds she made were not pretty. Sarah realized that she and Emma were both learning something new. Emma was learning how to play violin for the first time, and Sarah was learning how to dream again. Before she turned off the light, Sarah looked at the violin case one more time. Tomorrow she would practice again. She would help Emma learn the melody, and maybe, just maybe, she would let herself explore what other songs were hiding inside the simple tune they had chosen. For the first time in 15 years, Sarah went to sleep excited about tomorrow's music lesson. She dreamed about melodies floating through the air like butterflies, and about Emma playing violin on a stage while people smiled and clapped. In her dream, the simple song they were learning became something magical. Something that made people feel happy and sad and hopeful all at the same time. 3 weeks into their violin lessons, Sarah began to realize that the community center talent show was not going to be the small, friendly event she had imagined. It started with Emma coming home from school with a flyer about the talent show. The bright yellow paper had pictures of musical notes dancing around the edges and bold letters that said, "Annual Spring Talent Showcase, open to all ages." At the bottom, in smaller print, Sarah read something that made her stomach feel tight. With worry. Performances will be judged by local music teachers and community leaders. Prizes will be awarded for first, second, and third place in both youth and adult categories. "Emma," Sarah said carefully, "did you know this was a competition?" Emma looked up from her after-school snack. "What's a competition?" "It means people will pick winners and losers," Sarah explained. "It means some people will get prizes and some people won't." Emma shrugged. "That's okay. I just want to play music with you, Mom. I don't care about prizes. But Sarah cared. The idea of being judged made her hands feel sweaty. She had thought they would be playing for parents and friends in a casual, supportive environment. She had not signed up to perform in front of judges who would decide if they were good enough the next week. Emma brought home more news that made Sarah even more nervous. Mrs. Patterson says there are going to be lots of people at the talent show, Emma announced while Sarah was helping her practice holding her bow correctly. She says people from other towns are coming to watch because it's becoming really popular. Other towns? Sarah asked, trying to keep her voice calm. Yeah, and guess what? Jessica's mom hired a voice coach to help Jessica with her song, and Madison is taking extra dance classes 3 times a week. And this boy in my class named Tyler is going to play guitar, and his dad bought him a new guitar just for the talent show. Sarah felt like the walls of her small apartment were closing in. Everyone else was taking this seriously. Everyone else was preparing like professionals. And here she was, teaching her 8-year-old daughter how to play Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star on a 50-year-old violin. Maybe we should choose a different song, Sarah said. Something more impressive. But I like our song, Emma said. And I'm just learning how to play the easy parts. I can't learn a harder song in 3 weeks. Emma was right, of course. They had made good progress, but Emma was still a beginner. She could play the main melody of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star slowly and carefully with only a few mistakes. That was actually quite good for someone who had been playing for only 3 weeks. But it was not going to impress judges who were used to hearing polished performances. That Saturday, Sarah decided they needed to see what they were up against. She took Emma to the community center to watch the final rehearsal before the talent show. She told herself they were just going to observe and get familiar with the venue. But really, she wanted to see how good the other performers were. The community center was bigger than Sarah had expected. The main hall could seat at least 200 people, with rows of folding chairs facing a proper stage with curtains and bright lights. When they arrived, there were already several families there watching their children practice. The first person they saw was Jessica, the girl in Emma's class who was going to sing. Jessica was on stage wearing a sparkly dress, holding a microphone and singing a song from a popular movie. Her voice was clear and strong, and she moved around the stage like she had been performing her whole life. Her mother was sitting in the front row with a video camera, calling out encouragement. "She's really good," Emma whispered to Sarah. Nodded, but inside she felt a wave of panic. Jessica looked and sounded like a professional young performer. She had clearly been taking voice lessons for years. Next was Tyler, the boy with the new guitar. He played an instrumental piece that sounded complicated and impressive. His fingers moved quickly over the guitar strings, and he never looked at sheet music. He knew the song by heart. Then came Madison, the dancer. She wore a bright costume and moved across the stage like she was floating. Her routine was set to upbeat music, and she included jumps and spins that made the small audience clap and cheer. Sarah watched performer after performer, and each one was more polished than the last. There was a teenage girl who played piano like she belonged in a concert hall. There was a boy who did magic tricks with fancy equipment. There was even a family singing group that harmonized like they had their own recording contract. "Mom," Emma whispered, tugging on Sarah's sleeve. "Everyone is really, really good." Sarah looked down at her daughter's worried face. For the first time, Emma seemed to understand that this talent show was serious business. These were not just kids playing around. These were young performers who had been training for years. "Should we go home?" Emma asked in a small voice. Sarah's first instinct was to say yes. They could leave right now, before anyone saw them. They could tell everyone that Emma had gotten sick or that something important had come up. No one would judge them for a simple children's song if they were not there to play it. But then Sarah looked at the stage and imagined Emma standing there with her violin. She imagined the feeling of sharing music with people, even if it was not perfect. She remembered how excited Emma had been during their first lesson, and how proud she had looked when she finally played her first complete melody. "No, Sarah," surprising herself with how firm her voice sounded. We're not going home. We're going to play our song, and we're going to do our best. But Mom, our song is so simple compared to what everyone else is doing. Sarah knelt down so she was at Emma's eye level. Emma, do you remember why you wanted to be in this talent show? Emma thought for a moment. Because I wanted to do something special with you. That's right. And have we been doing something special together? Emma nodded. Yes, learning violin. With you has been the best part of my whole year. Then we've already won, Sarah said. Everything else is just extra. They stayed for the rest of the rehearsal, and Sarah tried to focus on the positive things she noticed. Yes, the other performers were very skilled, but some of them looked nervous and stressed. Some of the parents were pushy and demanding. Some of the kids seemed to be performing because their parents wanted them to, not because they loved it. Emma, on the other hand, genuinely loved their violin lessons. She practiced every day without being asked. She hummed their song while she did her homework. She had even started making up her own variations of the melody on the way home. Emma was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, Mom, I think our song is different from everyone else's songs, but that doesn't mean it's worse. What do you mean? Sarah asked. Well, Jessica's song is really pretty, but it's someone else's song. She's singing words that someone else wrote about feelings that someone else had. But our song, we're making it our own. You play parts that no one else plays. And when we play together, it sounds like us. Sarah felt tears start to form in her eyes. Emma was right. Over the past 3 weeks, their version of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star had become something unique. Sarah had continued to add harmonies and variations. She had found ways to make the simple melody sound sometimes playful, sometimes mysterious, sometimes hopeful, and Emma had started to add her own little touches too, like playing certain notes a little louder or holding certain notes a little longer. You're absolutely right, Sarah said. Our song sounds like us. That evening, after Emma went to bed, Sarah sat at her kitchen table with a cup of tea and the talent show flyer. She read through all the information again, trying to see it with new eyes. Yes, it was a competition. Yes, there would be judges. Yes, there would be people from other towns watching. But it was also a celebration of community talent. It was a chance for people to share something they loved with their neighbors. Sarah thought about all the other performers she had seen that day. They were good, very good. But they were also performing songs and routines that thousands of other people had performed before. Jessica was singing a song from a movie. Tyler was playing a guitar piece that Sarah had heard before. Madison was dancing to a popular song, but Sarah and Emma were creating something that had never existed before. They were taking a simple children's song that everyone knew and turning it into something personal and meaningful. They were not trying to impress anyone or win any prizes. They were just trying to share something beautiful. Sarah picked up her violin and played their song one more time before bed. As she played, she thought about the audience that would be listening in 2 weeks. Maybe some of them would be expecting something flashy and complicated. Maybe some of them would think a simple children's song was not appropriate for a talent competition, but maybe some of them would hear what Emma heard. Maybe some of them would notice that this version of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star sounded like love between a mother and daughter. Maybe some of them would remember what it felt like to discover something new and exciting. Sarah put the violin away and went to bed, feeling nervous but determined. She and Emma were going to perform their song exactly the way they had been practicing. They were not going to try to be something they were not. They were going to be themselves, and they were going to trust that being themselves was enough. The day of the talent show arrived with gray clouds and light rain. Sarah had barely slept the night before. Every time she closed her eyes, she imagined herself on stage making mistakes in front of hundreds of people. She imagined Emma forgetting how to hold her violin. She imagined the judges shaking their heads in disappointment. Sarah had requested the evening off from the hospital 2 weeks ago, but she had worked a double shift the day before to make up for it. Her body was tired, but her mind was racing. She drank 3 cups of coffee for breakfast and could not eat anything solid. Her hands were shaking too much to hold a spoon steady. Emma arrived at noon with Maria, just like they had planned. But Emma was different today. Usually she bounced into Sarah's apartment with energy and excitement. Today she walked slowly and stayed close to Maria's side. "I don't feel good," Emma announced as soon as she saw Sarah. "My stomach hurts." Sarah knelt down and felt Emma's forehead. She was not warm and her color was normal. "What kind of hurt?" Sarah asked gently. "Like there are butterflies flying around inside," Emma said. "But not nice butterflies. Scared butterflies." Sarah understood completely. She had the same scared butterflies in her own stomach. "Are you worried about tonight?" Emma nodded. "What if I mess up in front of all those people? What if I forget how to play? What if my hands shake too much?" Maria sat down on Sarah's couch and pulled Emma onto her lap. "Mia, it's normal to feel nervous before you perform. Even professional musicians get nervous." "They do?" Emma asked. "Of course they do," Sarah said, sitting down next to them. "Being nervous means you care about doing well. It means what you're doing is important to you." But as the afternoon went on, Sarah began to worry that Emma was too nervous to perform well. During their practice session, Emma made mistakes she had not made in weeks. Her bow slipped off the strings. She forgot where to put her fingers for certain notes. Twice she stopped in the middle of the song and said she could not remember what came next. "I can't do this, Mom," Emma said after a particularly frustrating attempt. "I'm going to embarrass us." Sarah set down her own violin and took Emma's hands in hers. "Emma, look at me. You've been practicing this song for 5 weeks. You know it by heart. Your body knows what to do even when your mind is worried. But what if I forget? Then I'll help you remember. What if you make a mistake? Then everyone will laugh at me." "No, they won't. And even if they did, we would finish our song anyway. Do you know why?" Emma shook her head. "Because we're not playing for them. We're playing for us. We're playing because we love music and we love each other. Remember what you told me after we watched the other performers? You said our song sounds like us. That's still true." Emma took a deep breath. "Will you stay right next to me on the stage?" "I'll be right there the whole time," Sarah promised. "We're a team." At 4 o'clock, they drove to the community center. Sarah had packed their violins carefully in a bag, along with extra rosin, a tuning fork, and tissues in case Emma's nose started running from nerves. The parking lot was already filling up with cars, and Sarah could see people walking toward the building carrying instrument cases and costume bags. Inside the community center, the scene was busy and chaotic. Performers and their families filled the lobby, and the noise level was overwhelming. Children in sparkling costumes ran around while their parents checked their hair and makeup. Teenagers tuned guitars and did vocal warm-ups. Parents called out last-minute instructions and encouragement. Sarah and Emma found the check-in table, where a cheerful woman with a clipboard was organizing the performance order. "Martinez," she called out when she saw them. "Your number. 12 on the list. That means you'll perform about halfway through the show." She handed Sarah a program, and Sarah's heart sank when she read it. The list of performers was 2 pages long. There were 36 acts total. The show was going to last for hours, which meant the audience would be tired and restless by the time Sarah and Emma performed. Sarah looked at the other listings on the program. Jessica Chun, vocal solo, Let It Go from Frozen. Tyler Williams, guitar instrumental, classical gas. Madison Foster, contemporary dance to Roar by Katy Perry. Every other act had impressive-sounding descriptions. Next to Sarah and Emma Martinez, it simply said, "Violin duet traditional." "Traditional?" Sarah thought to herself. "That makes us sound boring before we even start." The organizer directed them to the backstage area, which was really just a section of the hallway behind the stage, separated by a folding screen. The space was crowded with performers getting ready. Sarah and Emma found a small corner where they could set up their violin cases. Around them, the energy was intense. Jessica was doing vocal exercises with her mother, running through scales and practicing her high notes. Tyler was playing his guitar piece over and over, his parents offering suggestions about tempo and fingering. Madison was stretching in her bright pink costume, her dance teacher adjusting her hair ribbon. Everyone seemed to have a team of adults helping them prepare. Everyone except Sarah and Emma. "Look at all these people," Emma whispered to Sarah. "Everyone has coaches and teachers and fancy costumes." Sarah looked around and realized Emma was right. Most of the other performers had multiple adults helping. The professional-looking people with clipboards and stopwatches. Parents who clearly had experience with competitions and performances. Sarah felt very alone and very unprepared. She was just a nurse who had not played violin in 15 years. She was not a music teacher or a performance coach. She did not know anything about stage makeup or proper concert attire. She and Emma were wearing their nicest church clothes, but they looked plain and ordinary compared to everyone else. "Mom," Emma said in a small voice, "maybe we shouldn't do this. Look how fancy everyone else is. Look how prepared they are. We don't belong here." Sarah felt the same way, but she knew she could not let Emma see her doubt. "Emma, we belong here just as much as anyone else. We prepared too. We've been practicing for 5 weeks. We know our song." But even as she said the words, Sarah wondered, if they were true, had they really prepared enough? Their song was only 3 minutes long. Some of the other acts were performing pieces that lasted 6 or 7 minutes. Their song was a simple children's tune. Some of the other performers were playing complex classical pieces or contemporary songs that everyone would recognize. Sarah Martinez, a teenager with a headset, approached them. "You're up in about 45 minutes. Do you need anything? Water, a quiet place to warm up?" "We're fine," Sarah said automatically, but she was not fine at all. Her mouth was dry, her palms were sweaty, and she was beginning to feel dizzy. "Actually," the teenager continued, "I should mention that we have a pretty full house tonight. We sold about 250 tickets plus walk-ins. It's our biggest turnout ever." 250 people. Sarah had never performed for more than 30 people in her life, and that was back in high school. Emma had never performed for anyone except family and friends. 250 people? Emma repeated, her voice getting higher. That's like like our whole school, the teenager smiled. "Don't worry, you'll do great." The audience has been really enthusiastic tonight. Lots of cheering and applause. After the teenager left, Sarah and Emma sat in their corner without talking. Around them, the backstage energy was building. Performers were being called to the stage area to get ready for their turns. Parents were giving last-minute pep talks. The sounds of the audience applauding and cheering filtered through the walls. "Number 8, Madison Foster, you're on in 5 minutes. Someone called out. Sarah watched Madison and her dance teacher head toward the stage. Madison looked confident and excited. She waved to other performers as she passed, like she was already a star. "Mom," Emma said quietly, "I think I'm going to be sick." Sarah felt her own stomach lurch. She had been so focused on helping Emma feel confident that she had not paid attention to her own nerves. But now, sitting in this crowded backstage area, listening to the sounds of the large audience, she felt completely overwhelmed. What had she been thinking? She was not a performer. She was not prepared for this. She was going to embarrass herself. And Emma in front of hundreds of people. "Emma," Sarah said carefully, "if you really don't want to do this, we can leave. No one will think badly of us." Emma looked at her with surprise. "Do you want to leave, Mom?" Sarah was quiet for a moment. Part of her wanted to say yes. Part of her wanted to pack up their violins and go home where it was safe and quiet and no one would judge them, but then she thought about the past 5 weeks. She thought about Emma's excitement during their first lesson. She thought about the way Emma hummed their song while she did homework. She thought about the moment when Emma had said their music sounded like them, like love between a mother and daughter. "No," Sarah said, and she was surprised to find that she meant it. "I don't want to leave. I want us to play our song, even though we're scared." "Especially because we're scared," Sarah said. Doing something brave means doing it even when you're afraid. Emma took a deep breath. Okay, but will you promise to stay right next to me? I promise, Sarah said. We're going to walk out there together, and we're going to play our song together, and we're going to finish together, Lee. The sound of applause filled the backstage area as Tyler finished his guitar performance. Sarah could hear people cheering and calling out, "Bravo!" Through the thin walls, she could sense the energy of the crowd. They were engaged and enthusiastic, which was both encouraging and terrifying. Sarah and Emma Martinez, you're up next. The teenager with the headset appeared again. Follow me to the stage entrance. Sarah's legs felt weak as she stood up. Emma grabbed her hand tightly, and Sarah could feel her daughter's fingers trembling. They picked up their violins and followed the teenager through a maze of equipment and cables toward the side of the stage. Wait here until I give you the signal, the teenager whispered. The host will introduce you, then you'll walk out together. To center stage. Sarah and Emma stood in the wings, just out of sight of the audience. From here, Sarah could see part of the crowd. The community center was packed. Every seat was filled and people were standing along the walls. The stage lights were brighter than she had expected, creating a sharp line between the bright performance area and the dark audience beyond on stage. The host was reading from an index card. Our next performers are Sarah Martinez and her daughter, Emma. Sarah works as a nurse at St. Mary's Hospital, and this is Emma's first time performing on stage. They'll be playing a violin duet for us tonight. Sarah heard polite applause from the audience. It was the kind of applause people give when they're being supportive but don't know what to expect. Not the excited applause that Tyler had received, or the enthusiastic cheering that had greeted Madison's dance performance. Remember, Sarah whispered to Emma as they waited for their cue, we're playing for each other first and for them second. Emma nodded, but she looked very small holding her violin. Her face was pale, and Sarah could see that she was breathing quickly. And now, please welcome Sarah and Emma Martinez. The teenager gestured for them to go on stage. Sarah took a deep breath and stepped into the bright lights, keeping hold of Emma's hand. The audience was a sea of dark shapes beyond the lights. Sarah couldn't see individual faces, which was both disappointing and relieving. They walked to the center of the stage, where 2 music stands had been set up. Sarah had planned to use sheet music as a backup, even though they both knew the song by heart. But as they approached the stands, Sarah realized she had forgotten their music folder in the backstage area. For a moment, panic shot through her. What if Emma forgot the melody? What if Sarah forgot her harmony parts? But then she looked at Emma, who was carefully positioning her violin under her chin, just like they had practiced hundreds of times. We don't need the music, Sarah whispered. We know this song. Emma nodded and gave Sarah a small, brave smile. The audience was quiet now, waiting. Sarah could feel their attention like a weight pressing down on her shoulders. 250 people, all looking at them, all expecting something. Sarah raised her violin and positioned her bow over the strings. She looked at Emma, who was ready and waiting for her cue. For just a moment, everything felt suspended in time. This was it. After 5 weeks of practice, after years of keeping her musical dreams locked away, she was about to play violin in front of an audience again. Ready? Sarah whispered. Emma nodded. Sarah had planned to start with a simple introduction, just a few notes to set the tempo and key. But as her bow touched the strings, something unexpected happened. Instead of the careful, controlled beginning they had practiced, the music that came out was something much more personal. The first notes were soft and questioning, like someone calling out in the darkness. They were the musical equivalent of, "Is anyone there? Does anyone care?" The melody was recognizable as "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star," but it was transformed into something longing and hopeful. Emma came in exactly when she was supposed to, but instead of the nervous, hesitant playing Sarah had feared, Emma's notes were clear and confident. She played the simple melody with a sweetness that made it sound like a child's prayer. As they played together, Sarah felt something shift inside her. The nervousness didn't disappear completely, but it transformed into something else, into excitement. into joy, into a feeling of rightness that she had forgotten was possible. The audience faded away. The bright lights stopped feeling harsh. The stage stopped feeling foreign. There was only the music and Emma, and the conversation they were having through their violins. Sarah began to add the harmonies they had practiced, but they sounded different here on stage. They sounded fuller, more emotional. When she played the low, gentle accompaniment under Emma's melody, it sounded like a mother's voice humming a lullaby. When she played the higher harmony notes, it sounded like hope rising toward the stars. Halfway through their planned performance, Sarah made a decision that surprised even her. Instead of ending the song the way they had practiced, she kept playing. She began a variation she had never played before, one that seemed to create itself as she moved her bow across the strings. Emma looked at her with wide eyes, but she didn't stop playing. Instead, she followed Sarah's lead, adapting her simple melody to fit with the new direction the music was taking. The song became a conversation between them. Sarah would play a musical question and Emma would answer with her melody. Emma would play a phrase with particular emphasis, and Sarah would echo it in a different key. They were improvising together, creating music that had never existed before and would never exist. Again, in exactly the same way, the audience was completely silent. Not the polite, waiting silence of before, but the deep, focused silence of people who are hearing something special and don't want to miss a single note. Sarah found herself playing with a freedom she had never experienced before. She played high notes that soared above Emma's melody like birds in flight. She played rhythms that made the simple children's tune sound like a dance. She played soft, mysterious passages that transformed "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star" into something ancient and sacred. And through it all, Emma stayed with her. Emma, who had been playing violin for only 5 weeks, was matching Sarah's musical ideas with an intuition that amazed her mother. When Sarah played something playful, Emma made her melody bounce and skip. When Sarah played something gentle, Emma made her notes soft and tender. They were no longer just playing a song they had practiced. They were creating music together in real time, responding to each other and to the moment and to the feeling of sharing something beautiful with their community. Sarah realized that she was smiling. Not the nervous, forced smile she had planned to wear during their performance, but a real smile of pure joy. She was playing music again. Really playing music, not just going through the motions or trying to remember old skills. She was creating something new and alive and meaningful. Emma was smiling too. The pale, nervous child who had walked onto the stage had been replaced by a young musician who was completely absorbed in the magic they were making together. The song began to move toward its conclusion, but not the ending they had practiced. This ending was building to something bigger, something that felt like celebration and gratitude and love all mixed together. Sarah played a final series of harmonies that seemed to lift Emma's melody up and present it to the audience like a gift. Emma responded by playing her final notes with a confidence and beauty that made Sarah's heart swell with pride. When the last note faded into silence, neither Sarah nor Emma moved. They stood there on the stage, still holding their violins, still connected to each other and to the music they had just created. The silence stretched for what felt like forever. Sarah began to worry that something was wrong. Had their performance been so different from what people expected that no one knew how to respond? But then, from somewhere in the dark audience, came the sound of one person clapping, slowly, thoughtfully, like someone who had just witnessed something they needed to process before they could react. Then another person joined in. Then another. Within seconds, the entire audience was on their feet, applauding with an enthusiasm that made the building shake. Sarah looked out at the sea of standing people and felt tears start to run down her cheeks. This was not the polite, supportive applause they had received when they walked on stage. This was not the excited cheering that had greeted the more polished performances earlier in the evening. This was something different entirely. This was the sound of people who had been moved by something unexpected and beautiful. This was the sound of a community recognizing that they had just witnessed something special. Emma looked up at Sarah with amazement in her eyes. "Mom, she whispered, barely audible above the applause. Did we really just do that? Sarah knelt down and hugged her daughter, not caring that they were still on stage in front of hundreds of people. Yes, sweetheart, we really just did that. The applause continued for what felt like hours, but was probably only a few minutes. People were calling out, "Bravo!" and "Beautiful!" Some people in the audience were wiping their eyes. Sarah and Emma bowed together, still holding their violins, still hardly believing what had just happened. As they walked off stage, Sarah realized that something fundamental had changed. Not just in how she felt about music, but in how she felt about herself, and about what was possible in her life. As Sarah and Emma walked off the stage, still carrying their violins and still feeling the energy of the standing ovation, they were met by the teenager with the headset. But instead of the business-like efficiency Sarah had expected, the young woman's eyes were bright with tears. That was ... She started, then stopped and shook her head. I've been working these talent shows for 3 years, and I have never heard anything like that. You two just made everyone in that audience remember why they love music. Behind her, other performers and their families had gathered in the backstage area. Instead of the competitive atmosphere Sarah had felt earlier, there was something different. In the air now, people were looking at Sarah and Emma with respect and admiration, but also with something else. Something that looked like inspiration. Jessica, the girl who had sung the song from the movie, approached them first. "Emma," she said, "that was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. You made me cry happy tears." Tyler, the boy with the guitar, was right behind her. "Mrs. Martinez, how long have you been playing violin? You sounded like someone from the symphony." Sarah felt overwhelmed by the attention, but also deeply moved. These young performers who had seemed so polished and professional earlier were looking at her and Emma like they had just witnessed something extraordinary. "I played in high school," Sarah said simply, "but I stopped for 15 years. This is the first time I've performed since I was 18. 15 years? Madison, the dancer, joined the group gathering around them. "But you played like you never stopped. Like the music was just waiting inside you?" Emma was glowing with pride and excitement. "My mom is the best violin player in the world," she announced to anyone who would listen. "She taught me everything in just 5 weeks." An older woman approached them, and Sarah recognized her as Mrs. Patterson, Emma's teacher. "Sarah, I had no idea," she said warmly. "When Emma told our class that her mother was going to teach her violin, I thought it was sweet. I had no idea we were going to hear something so ... so professional, so moving." "It wasn't professional," Sarah said, still feeling uncertain about all the praise. "We just played a simple song." "Simple?" Mrs. Patterson laughed gently. "My dear, what you just did up there was anything but simple. You took a melody that everyone knows and turned it into a story. You made it sound like hope and love and dreams all wrapped together." More people kept approaching them. Parents who had been in the audience came backstage to tell Sarah and Emma how much their performance had meant to them. Other performers asked Sarah if she gave violin lessons. Children asked Emma how long it took to learn to play so beautifully. "Mom," Emma whispered to Sarah as they were surrounded by well-wishers, "I think we were good." Sarah laughed and hugged her daughter. "Yes, sweetheart, I think we were." But the most meaningful moment came when they were finally alone for a few minutes, packing up their violins in their quiet corner of the backstage area. Sarah was carefully placing her violin in its case when she noticed that her hands were no longer shaking. The nervousness that had consumed her all day was gone, replaced by something she had not felt in years: deep satisfaction. "Emma," Sarah said as she closed the violin case, "can I tell you something?" "What, Mom?" "When I was your age, I dreamed about playing violin for people. I dreamed about making music that would make people feel something special. Tonight, we did that together." Emma looked thoughtful. "Is that why you look so happy when we were playing? Even happier than when we practice at home?" Sarah considered this. Emma was right. During their performance, especially during the parts where they had improvised together, Sarah had felt a joy so pure and complete that it had surprised her. It was different from the satisfaction of playing well during practice. It was different from the relief of not making mistakes. It was the joy of sharing something beautiful with people who appreciated it. Yes, Sarah said. Playing music is wonderful, but sharing music with people who understand it, that's magical. Will we do it again? Emma asked hopefully. Before Sarah could answer, the host of the talent show appeared at their corner. He was a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a warm smile. Sarah and Emma Martinez, he said. I'm David Chun, the Community Center Director. I wanted to thank you personally for what you shared with us tonight. Thank you for having us, Sarah replied politely. Actually, David continued, I wanted to ask you something. Every December we host a winter concert featuring local musicians. It's a smaller, more intimate event than tonight's talent show, more focused on the music itself rather than competition. Would you be interested in performing a longer set for us? Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. A longer set? That would mean learning multiple songs, preparing a real program. It would mean stepping into the role of a musician again, not just someone who played violin as a hobby with her daughter. How long a set? Sarah asked carefully. Usually about 15 to 20 minutes, 3 or 4 songs. We have people who play classical music, folk music, jazz, all kinds of styles. From what I heard tonight, I think you could play anything you wanted and it would be beautiful. Emma was bouncing with excitement. Mom, can we do it, please? Sarah looked at her daughter's eager face, then at David's encouraging expression. 6 hours ago, she had been terrified to play one simple song in front of people. Now she was being invited to perform a full set of music. Can I think about it? Sarah asked. Of course, David said. But I hope you'll say yes, what you two created up there tonight? That's the kind of music our community needs to hear. After David left, Sarah and Emma sat quietly for a moment, processing everything that had happened. Around them, the backstage area was gradually emptying as performers and their families headed home. The energy of the evening was winding down, but Sarah still felt electrified. Mom, Emma said softly, what happened when we were playing tonight? It felt different from when we practice. Sarah thought about how to explain it. When we practice, at home, we're learning the music. But tonight, the music was learning us. We were having a conversation with each other through our violins, and we were also having a conversation with everyone who was listening. I felt like the music was alive. Emma said, like it was moving around us and through us. That's exactly what it was like, Sarah agreed. That's what happens when musicians really connect with each other and with their audience. The music becomes bigger than just the notes we're playing. As they prepared to leave, Sarah realized that something had shifted in her relationship with music. For 15 years, she had thought of her violin as something from her past, something she had given up in order to be practical and responsible. Tonight, she had discovered that music was not something she had lost. It was something that had been waiting patiently for her to rediscover it. The drive home was quiet, but it was a peaceful quiet. Emma fell asleep in the passenger seat still, wearing her good dress, still glowing with the happiness of their shared achievement. Sarah drove slowly through the familiar streets of their town. Seeing everything with new eyes, she passed the hospital where she worked, the place where she spent most of her time taking care of other people. Tomorrow night she would be back. There, checking on patients and dispensing medications and comforting worried families. But now she knew that she was not just a nurse. She was also a musician. She passed Emma's school, where her daughter spent her days learning and growing and dreaming about the future. Now Emma knew that she was not just a student. She was also a musician. Sarah thought about the winter concert David had invited them to perform in. December was 8 months away. That would give them time to learn new songs, to develop their skills further, to explore what other kinds of music they could create together. But more than that, it would give them time to grow into their new identities as musicians. Tonight had shown them that they had something special to share with the world. The winter concert would be an opportunity to develop that gift and share it again when they got home. Sarah helped sleepy Emma change into her pajamas and brush her teeth. As she tucked her daughter into bed, Emma looked up at her with sleepy, but still excited eyes. "Mom, I'm glad you had that violin in your closet." Sarah smiled and kissed Emma's forehead. "I'm glad too, sweetheart. I'm glad we found the music together." After Emma was asleep, Sarah sat in her living room with a cup of tea, replaying the evening in her mind. She thought about the moment when she had decided to keep playing beyond their planned ending. She thought about the way Emma had followed her musical lead without hesitation. She thought about the standing ovation that had lasted several minutes, but most of all, she thought about the feeling of being completely herself on that stage. For 15 years, she had been living as only part of who she really was. Tonight, she had remembered the missing piece. Sarah looked at the violin case sitting on her kitchen table. Tomorrow she would open it again. She would play not because she had to prepare for a performance, but because she wanted to explore the music that was growing inside her. She would play because she was a musician, and musicians played music. It was as simple and as profound as that. The standing ovation had ended, but its effects rippled through the community center like waves from a stone dropped in still water. As Sarah and Emma stood in the wings, still holding their violins and trying to process what had just happened, the impact of their performance was spreading through the audience in ways they could not yet see. In the third row, Mrs. Eleanor Walsh, an 82-year-old retired music teacher, sat with tears streaming down her face. She had taught elementary school music for 43 years and had heard thousands of children play Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, but she had never heard it played with such honesty and emotion. The simple melody had reminded her why she had fallen in love with teaching music in the first place. Near the back of the auditorium, 17-year-old Marcus Johnson sat in stunned silence even as people around him continued to applaud. Marcus played trumpet in his high school band, but lately he had been thinking about quitting music to focus on college preparations. His parents had been pushing him to be more practical, to concentrate on subjects that would help him get a good job, but listening to Sarah and Emma, he remembered the feeling of playing music just for the joy of it. He decided that night that he would not quit band after all. In the front row, David Chun, the community center director, was already thinking about how to change the format of future events. He had organized talent shows for years, focusing on competition and prizes. But Sarah and Emma's performance had shown him something different. It had shown him the power of music to connect people, to move hearts, to create moments of shared beauty. He was already planning a new type of event, one that would celebrate music for its own sake rather than for winning. Dr. Jennifer Lopez, Sarah's supervisor at the hospital, had come to the talent show to support one of her nurses. She knew Sarah as a competent, caring professional, but she had no idea that Sarah had this artistic side. As she watched Sarah and Emma bow together on stage, Dr. Lopez began thinking about the stress her nurses faced every day and about how important it was for them to have outlets for creativity and joy. She decided to look into starting a music program at the hospital, something that would benefit both staff and patients. But perhaps the most moved person in the entire audience was Maria, Sarah's sister, who sat in the middle section wiping away tears she had not expected to cry. Maria had watched Sarah struggle for years to balance work and single motherhood. She had seen her sister give up dreams and ambitions to focus on practical necessities. Tonight, Maria had watched Sarah come alive in a way she had not seen since they were teenagers. The sister she remembered, the one who used to play violin for hours in their childhood bedroom, had returned. As the applause finally began to fade and people started to sit back down, the host returned to the stage to introduce the next performer. But the energy in the room had changed completely. The audience was still buzzing with emotion from Sarah and Emma's performance. People were leaning over to whisper to their neighbors about what they had just witnessed. "Did you know that nurse could play like that? That little girl has been taking lessons for only 5 weeks. I've never heard Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star sound so beautiful." That wasn't just a performance, that was something special. The remaining performers faced a unique challenge. How do you follow an act that has moved an audience so deeply? but rather than being discouraged. Most of the remaining performers found themselves inspired by what Sarah and Emma had accomplished. They had shown that technical perfection was not the only way to move people. They had shown that authenticity and emotion could be more powerful than flashy showmanship. The teenage girl who played piano after Sarah and Emma chose to play a simple piece by Bach instead of the complicated contemporary song she had planned. Inspired by the emotional honesty she had just witnessed, she played with a gentleness and sincerity that brought tears to her own eyes. The family singing group that performed near the end of the show changed their approach as well. Instead of the peppy, choreographed number they had rehearsed, they chose to sing a traditional folk song their grandmother had taught them. They sang it simply, without fancy harmonies or movements, and the audience responded with the same kind of emotional appreciation they had shown. Sarah and Emma. By the time the last performer had finished, it was clear that the evening had become something different from what anyone had expected. What had started as a competition had transformed into a celebration of music and community. When all the performances were complete, the judges retired to deliberate about the prizes, but their job had become much more difficult than usual. How do you judge performances that had moved people in such different ways? How do you compare technical skill with emotional impact? How do you award prizes when the most memorable performance of the evening had broken all the conventional rules? Mrs. Eleanor Walsh, who was serving as one of the judges, found herself in a position she had never been in before. "I've been judging music competitions for 30 years, she told her fellow judges. "I know how to evaluate technique and difficulty and execution. But tonight, I heard something that reminded me why we have music competitions in the first place. Not to create winners and losers, but to celebrate the power of music to touch people's hearts." The other judges nodded in agreement. They had all been moved by Sarah and Emma's performance, but they had also been impressed by how that performance had inspired the other acts to reach deeper into their own musicality while the judges deliberated. Sarah and Emma mingled with the other performers and audience members in the lobby. The experience was overwhelming for both of them. Complete strangers approached them to share how much their music had meant to them. An elderly man told Sarah that her playing had reminded him of his late wife, who had also played violin. A young mother said that Emma's brave performance had inspired her own daughter to want to take music lessons. A teenager asked Sarah if she would consider teaching violin privately. "I'm not qualified to teach," Sarah protested. "I just started playing again myself." "You're qualified to teach what matters most," the teenager replied. "You're qualified to teach people how to make music from the heart." Emma was having her own conversations with the other young performers. Several children asked her how she had learned to play so beautifully in such a short time. "My mom says the most important thing is to play like you mean it," Emma told them. "Don't just play the notes. Play the feelings." When the judges finally returned with their decisions, the energy in the room was different from a typical competition. People seemed less concerned about who would win prizes and more interested in celebrating what they had all shared together. The awards ceremony began with the youth categories. Emma's name was not called for third place or second place. Sarah felt a moment of disappointment, not because she thought Emma deserved to win, but because she hoped her daughter would not be discouraged. But when the first place winner in the youth category was announced, something unexpected happened. Instead of Emma's name, they called Tyler, the guitarist. But as Tyler walked to the stage to accept his award, he stopped at the microphone. "I want to say something," Tyler announced. "This award is for technical achievement, and I'm grateful for it. But tonight, Emma Martinez showed all of us something more important than technical achievement. She showed us how to play with joy and love. Emma, you're the real winner tonight." The audience erupted in applause, and Tyler gestured for Emma to join him on stage. Emma looked at Sarah with uncertainty, but Sarah nodded encouragingly. As Emma walked to the stage, the entire audience stood up again, applauding not just for her musical performance, but for the grace and authenticity she had brought to the evening. The adult category followed a similar pattern. Sarah's name was not called for the traditional prizes. But when Mrs. Eleanor Walsh was invited to give closing remarks as the senior judge, she had something special to say. In 43 years of teaching music and 27 years of judging competitions, I have heard thousands of performances. Tonight I heard something that reminded me why I fell in love with music in the first place. Sarah Martinez, you did not just play violin tonight. You shared your heart with us. You showed us that the most important thing about music is not how perfectly you play the notes, but how deeply you feel them and how honestly you share that feeling with others. Mrs. Walsh paused and looked directly at Sarah. There is no official award for what you accomplished tonight, but I want you to know that you have inspired every person in this room, including the judges. You have reminded us all why we love music. The audience rose to their feet once more, this time in a standing ovation that lasted even longer than the one immediately after Sarah and Emma's performance. As people applauded, they were not just appreciating a single musical performance. They were celebrating the power of authenticity, the beauty of shared dreams between a mother and daughter, and the reminder that the most profound art often comes from the simplest places. When the applause finally ended and people began to leave the community center, many of them carried something new with them. They carried the memory of hearing familiar music transformed into something transcendent. 6 months after the talent show, Sarah's life had changed in ways both small and profound. She still worked the night shift at St. Mary's Hospital, still picked up Emma from school every afternoon, still lived in the same small apartment, but music had woven itself into the fabric of their daily routine, like a bright thread through ordinary cloth, every morning after work. Instead of going straight to bed, Sarah would spend an hour practicing violin. The neighbors had grown accustomed to the sound of music drifting from her third-floor window as the sun came up. Mrs. Chun from the apartment next door had even mentioned that Sarah's playing helped her start each day with a peaceful feeling. Emma's violin lessons had evolved far beyond the simple "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star" they had started with. She could now play several folk songs, a few classical pieces, and had even started composing her own melodies. More importantly, she approached music with a confidence and joy that surprised everyone who heard her play. The most significant change, however, had begun 3 weeks after the talent show, when Sarah received a phone call that would reshape how she thought about the purpose of music in her life. "Sarah Martinez," the voice on the phone had said. "This is Dr. Patricia Williams from the hospital's patient care committee. We heard about your beautiful violin performance at the community center talent show, and we have a proposal for you." Dr. Williams explained that several staff members had approached the hospital administration about starting a music therapy program for patients and their families. "We know that music can have healing effects," she said. "It can reduce anxiety, help with pain management, and provide comfort during difficult times. Would you be interested in volunteering to play for patients?" Sarah's first instinct had been to say no. She was not a trained music therapist. She was just a nurse who played violin as a hobby. But then she remembered Mrs. Eleanor Walsh's invitation to play at the nursing home and how meaningful that had felt. "I'm not a professional musician," Sarah had said carefully. "We're not looking for a professional musician," Dr. Williams replied. "We're looking for someone who understands both music and caring for people. From what we've heard, you're exactly the right person." That conversation had led to Sarah spending one evening a week playing violin in the hospital's family waiting areas and, when appropriate, in patient rooms. The response had been overwhelmingly positive. Anxious family members found themselves relaxing as gentle melodies filled the sterile hallways. Patients who had trouble sleeping discovered that soft violin music helped them rest. Children facing scary medical procedures became calmer when they heard familiar tunes played with warmth and love. Emma often joined Sarah for these hospital visits, bringing her own small violin and adding her sweet melodies to her mother's harmonies. The sight of a mother and daughter making music together had a special effect on families who were dealing with illness and uncertainty. It reminded them that beautiful things could happen even in difficult places. One evening in particular stood out in Sarah's memory. They had been playing in the pediatric ward when a 7-year-old boy named Michael, who was waiting for surgery the next morning, asked if they knew any superhero songs. "I don't know any superhero songs," Emma had told him honestly, "but I could make one up for you." What followed was 15 minutes of Emma improvising a melody that sounded brave and strong and hopeful, while Sarah provided accompaniment that made the simple tune sound like it belonged in a movie about heroes saving the day. Michael had fallen asleep listening to his song, and his worried parents had tears in their eyes as they thanked Sarah and Emma for giving their son a moment of joy before his surgery. "That boy will remember this music for the rest of his life," Michael's mother had said. "You've given him something to be brave with." These hospital visits had taught Sarah something important about the power of music. It was not just entertainment or artistic expression. It was a form of communication that could reach people when words failed. It was a way of saying you are not alone, and there is still beauty in the world, and tomorrow can be better than today. The winter concert that David Chun had invited them to perform at had been another milestone in their musical journey. Instead of the simple duet they had played at the talent show, Sarah and Emma had prepared a 20-minute program that included folk songs, classical pieces, and their own arrangements of familiar melodies. The audience for the winter concert had been smaller than the talent show crowd, but more focused on the music itself. People had come specifically to listen, to appreciate, to be moved by what they heard. Sarah and Emma's performance had been received with the same kind of emotional appreciation they had experienced at the talent show, but in a more intimate setting that allowed for deeper musical exploration. After the winter concert, opportunities had continued to present themselves. The coffee shop owner who had approached them after the talent show had invited them to play during Sunday brunch once a month. A local church had asked them to provide music for a wedding. The public library had requested their participation in the summer reading program event. Each performance had been different, but all of them had reinforced the same lesson. When music is played with authenticity and love, people respond with appreciation and connection. Sarah had also begun teaching violin lessons, despite her initial protests that she was not qualified. Word had spread about the nurse who had created magic with her daughter at the talent show, and several parents had contacted her asking if she would teach their children. "I'm not a trained teacher," Sarah would tell each caller, "but you know how to help someone love music," they would reply. "That's what our children need." Sarah's teaching style was different from what most music teachers offered. Instead of focusing primarily on technique and classical repertoire, she emphasized the joy of making music and the importance of playing with emotion and meaning. Her students learned proper form and basic music theory, but they also learned to listen to their hearts when they played. Emma had become Sarah's unofficial assistant teacher, helping younger students feel comfortable with their instruments and demonstrating that someone their age could make beautiful music. The sight of Emma patiently showing a 5-year-old how to hold a bow properly, or encouraging a shy 8-year-old to play louder, filled Sarah with pride that went beyond Emma's musical accomplishments. "You're not just learning to be a musician," Sarah would tell Emma. "You're learning to be a teacher and a leader and someone who helps other people discover their own gifts." The most unexpected development had come when Mrs. Eleanor Walsh, the retired music teacher who had judged the talent show, had approached Sarah with a surprising proposal. "I'm 82 years old," Mrs. Walsh had said during one of their monthly visits to the nursing home. "I won't be able to run the community music program much longer. I've been looking for someone to take over, someone who understands that music is about more than just playing the right notes. Would you consider it?" Sarah had been overwhelmed by the suggestion. Mrs. Walsh was talking about her taking over responsibility for organizing concerts, coordinating with local musicians, and managing a program that served hundreds of people in their community. "I don't have the experience," Sarah had protested. "You have something more important than experience," Mrs. Walsh had replied. "You have the heart for it. You understand what music can do for people. You know how to bring out the best in other musicians. And most importantly, you believe that everyone deserves to have music in their lives. Sarah had asked for time to think about it, but deep down, she already knew her answer. The idea of helping coordinate a community-wide music program felt like a natural extension of everything she had been doing since the talent show. It would allow her to use her organizational skills from nursing, her musical abilities, and her growing understanding of how music could serve people in their community. Now, as Sarah sat in her apartment on a quiet Sunday morning 6 months after the talent show, she reflected on how much had changed. Emma was still asleep, exhausted from the previous evening's performance at a local festival. Their violin cases sat side by side on the kitchen table, ready for their afternoon practice session. Sarah made herself a cup of coffee and opened the notebook where she had been planning music programs for the community center. Mrs. Walsh had officially asked her to take over the position, and Sarah had accepted. Starting in the fall, she would be responsible for organizing monthly concerts, coordinating with local schools' music programs, and managing a small fund that provided instruments for children who could not afford them. It was a big responsibility, but it felt right in a way that surprised Sarah. For years, she had thought of herself as someone who took care of people's physical needs. Now she was discovering that she could also take care of people's emotional and spiritual needs through music. The phone rang, interrupting her planning. It was Maria, calling with news that made Sarah's heart swell with happiness. "Sarah, you'll never guess what happened," Maria said excitedly. "Remember my youngest, Carlos? He's been begging me for music lessons ever since he heard you and Emma play. Well, yesterday he made his own violin out of a shoebox and rubber bands.